Welcome to Creative Brews. I'm Kristen, and this is your weekly dose of creativity, where photography, design, and life come together. So, grab your favorite drink, and let's talk about what's brewing. Welcome back to another episode. As you can tell, this is going to be a Mindset Myths mini-series episode. And for some of you who regularly tune in, especially last season and season 1, you will know that I started a mini-series called Mindset Myths. And it was kind of by accident, but it's perfect. So today's episode, we're going to go ahead and jump right on into it. The mini-series is titled Mindset Myths, so it is exactly what it sounds like. And if you'd like to hear an intro, you can tune into last season's episode. I'm not really too sure if I did an actual intro for this mini-series, but in today's episode, we are going to be talking about good things come to those who wait. Or do they? So, a lot of us either grew up hearing, or we've definitely heard the phrase, good things come to those who wait. And it definitely sounds comforting and patient and even a little wise. But is waiting really the strategy for creating the life or business you want? Or whatever it is that you're building? So I know a lot of these mindset myths, I know a lot of people are going to hear them and they're going to say, oh, well, you're not really supposed to take the phrases or whatever it is to heart. And I definitely get that. These phrases are supposed to be inspirational and all of that jazz, but sometimes what started as inspiration can sometimes turn into you applying it in your life so much so that it becomes a mindset. So, and then you kind of realize, wow, I've kind of you've allowed this inspirational quote or saying or whatever it is kind of creep in and leak in, and it becomes a mindset myth. And you kind of either start lying to yourself or, fake it till you make it, or whatever it is, right? So we're definitely going to be exploring that. I am going to start off by introducing myself. If you are just tuning in, or maybe this isn't your first time tuning in, I'm Kristen, and I am the founder of KBCreativeNC. And like I said, if you're new here, this is Creative Brews. And it's basically where we sit down sort of together in a roundabout way over coffee or over whatever beverage you're drinking. Sometimes it's a snack. And we talk about the real side of not only building a business, but life in general. So this podcast started off as me talking about really all things in life. So it started off, talking about photography, design, and life. And I believe that's what I say. That's basically what I say in my intro. And like I've said previously, me, I started this little series last season. So if you're interested, you can tune in to some of those. Today, like I said, we're diving into good things come to those who wait. Like I stated, it sounds great. It sounds wise, patient, and peaceful. But when it comes to building a life, a business, or whatever your dream is waiting really the strategy? So we're going to go ahead and dive into that. And again, I'm going to just reiterate a few things before we get into all of this. But I realize that this saying is supposed to be inspirational and stuff like that. But in our society, if you keep on saying good things come to those who wait, or everything happens for a reason, or fake it till you make it, the list could go on literally. It sometimes can easily become a mindset if you repeatedly tell yourself something. Your mind is going to believe it, right? So yes. Okay, so originally the idea behind it had more to do with patience and timing, which are both important things. You know, relationships take time, skills take time to develop, businesses take time to grow. So yes, nothing meaningful really happens overnight, and I completely get that. But somewhere along the way, this saying started to take on a slightly different meaning, and it kind of creep in. Instead of encouraging patience while working towards something, it started to sound like success will eventually arrive if we simply wait long enough and be a good person, or, you know, you kind of get what I'm saying. And that's where the message can start to become a little misleading. Because in reality, waiting by itself rarely creates momentum. Waiting without movement often turns into stagnation. So, of course, I believe in the previous Mindset Myths mini-series episodes, I would also talk about the psychology. I would kind of give, talk about the quote or the inspirational saying, whatever it is, and then I'd kind of get into the psychology behind it, and then how you can kind of flip it to, quote unquote, make it work for you, or how to reframe it so that way it's more of a productive way to look at things. I hope that all makes sense. So, the difference between waiting and preparing, because this is where it makes a difference. Here's the distinction I think is really important and some things to think about. There's a big difference between passive waiting and intentional preparation. Passive waiting looks like you have an idea for a business, but you're waiting until the timing feels perfect. You want to start creating content, but you're waiting until you feel more confident. You want to launch something, but you're waiting until everything is perfectly figured out. And guess what? Sometimes we convince ourselves that we're being patient, when really we're just avoiding the uncomfortable parts of starting. Preparation looks very different. So before we talk about that, that's my biggest advice for someone who is wanting to build anything from the ground up. It could look like anything for anyone. So like a business, if you want to build a business, if you want to start a podcast, if you want to start doing photography and all these things, my biggest advice to anyone is to just start. It's not going to be perfect. Nothing is perfect. Nobody's perfect. The word perfect just does not exist. So, preparation is when you're learning, you're experimenting, creating, and growing, even when the results aren't immediate, because they're not gonna be. You're still showing up, even when it's hard. Not every day are you going to want to show up as the business owner. I'm going to use business owner because that's, my experience. That's the reason why I introduced myself in the beginning. I am the founder of KBCreativeNC, and I've built that from the ground up. And let me tell you, you're not going to want to show up every single time. That's not to say that, you don't want to be a business owner anymore. It's just that you have to be consistent and you have to show up even when you don't feel like it, even when the weather is bad, even when you're on your period, even when you don't feel good. You know what I mean? So I think you get the point here. So you're still taking small steps forward, because if you're not, then you're going to just become stagnant. If you stop updating your website, if you stop promoting your business, or if you stop networking and stuff like that, that's what I meant by promoting, is by networking, then you're not going to move forward. So in other words, you're not just waiting. You're creating the conditions for something to happen. And especially if you're trying to manifest something, you can't just manifest something from the couch. You can't just wish for something and it show up at your front door or land in your lap, So you have to have some kind of momentum in order for your manifestations to come about, to come into fruition. So we're going to go ahead and get into the psychology here. There's actually some really interesting psychology behind why waiting can sometimes feel easier than taking action. Like I've previously said before, your brain is built to keep you safe. Changes are going to be uncomfortable. Anything that's uncomfortable to your brain is going to say, oh, wait a minute, this is uncomfortable. I have to keep you safe. Let's go back to something that I know we don't like, but it's predictable, right? So one concept comes from research by psychologist Martin, I cannot pronounce the last name, but it's Seligman, called learned helplessness. The idea describes what happens when people start believing that their actions don't really influence outcomes. When that belief forms, people often stop trying to change their circumstances, even when opportunities are actually possible. And sometimes certain sayings can unintentionally reinforce that mindset. So if we grow up hearing that good things will eventually come if we just wait long enough, it can slowly shift our thinking into something more passive. So before I move forward, maybe you heard this saying while growing up. Maybe, it's basically definitely something, like I said, it's trying to be an inspirational saying or quote, however you want to look at it. Some of these things we hear while growing up, some of these things we might hear in our adulthood and all this stuff. But it can definitely quickly evolve into something counterintuitive. So instead of asking, what could I do to move forward, we start thinking, I guess I just need to wait for the right moment. which is, I think, definitely something that we can all agree on. Especially, this is a bit different of a topic, but especially when it comes to things like, what are you going to college for? Or after college, what are you going to do? Like, a lot of people start, buying homes, getting married, and having kids. And a lot of people are like, well, we're just waiting for the right moment to have kids. So I know that's a bit of a different topic, but anyways, and while patience is valuable, powerlessness is not. One of the healthiest psychological shifts we can make is moving from a passive mindset to an active one. That is very key here. So you might want to go back and listen to that again. So instead of thinking, I hope something good happens, we start asking, what small step could I take today that moves me closer to what I want? That simple question changes everything, and it really does. So, here's some other fascinating pieces of psychology. It's definitely powerful. And it comes from research by Harvard Professor Teresa Ambile, Amabile. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. Probably not, and I definitely apologize. But she studied motivation and discovered something called the progress principle. And her research showed that one of the most powerful motivators for humans is the feeling of making progress, even if it's small steps forward. So even if it's just very small progress, it still is a good motivator, and powerful too. When we feel like we're moving forward, our motivation increases. Our creativity increases. Our confidence increases. But when we feel stuck or stagnant, our energy tends to drop. So maybe the motivation kind of slacks, or maybe, you want to take some time to rest, but your brain's like, well, we've got some good momentum here. Let's keep this thing going. And honestly, we all know that that's not humanly possible. And that does lead to burnout, ultimately, right? So, which means if someone is simply waiting for things to happen without creating movement, they're also missing the psychological benefits that come from momentum. Progress creates motivation. Motivation creates more progress, so you can kind of see the loop there. And that cycle is often what slowly builds into opportunities. So if you would like more of a deep dive into the psychological side of things, let me know, and I can definitely try to put something together. Of course, I do my own research. I encourage everyone listening or tuning in to do your own research. It definitely helps, especially because I think it, you can only explain but so much, and sometimes when you do your own research, it kind of just clicks. So, we're going to move into why action feels better than waiting here. There's also something psychologists sometimes refer to as an action bias. Humans naturally feel better when we're doing something rather than nothing, right? Even if the action is small. Action gives us a sense of agency, which is the feeling that we have influence over our own path. And that sense of agency is incredibly important for both creativity and entrepreneurship. Because when you're building something, a business, a creative project, or even a new direction in life, the path is rarely perfectly clear. Which is also something, because if it's not perfectly clear, your brain, then you can kind of see where I'm going here. Your brain is going to tell you, oh, wait a minute, is going to flag you to stop, to, I can't see, this isn't predictable, this path isn't clear, we got to go back. So clarity usually doesn't appear before action. It appears because of action. It appears because of movement. Movement creates feedback. Feedback creates learning, and learning creates growth. And growth creates, you guessed it, new opportunities. So here's a better way to think about things, a reframing, and a way that you could think of good things come to those who wait. So, of course, maybe it's not entirely wrong. Again, like I said in the beginning, I am kind of taking this in the literal form and breaking it down and kind of explaining why it could easily become a mindset for someone who maybe allows that to happen. But the saying, good things come to those who wait, definitely maybe needs a small update, of course. So, good things come to those who wait. I believe it's more accurate to say good things come to those who prepare, stay curious, and keep showing up, rather than waiting. Because waiting alone doesn't create momentum. But patience prepared with action, that's where things start to shift. That's where opportunities begin to appear, and where your brain can finally go, whew, okay, I can see what you're doing here. I can finally see the path. I see the opportunities. Let's keep this going. So your brain is definitely can be a roller coaster per se. And that's where quiet progress, if I could talk, starts to build behind the scenes. And before I close this out, that's where a lot of business owners who are building from the ground up, when someone, and maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a family member, when they're like, oh, what are you doing these days? Or, maybe you're catching up or whatever the case is. And, you say, well, I built a business, KBCreativeNC, and we offer mindful design support, and, you keep going and all that. And they're like, oh, okay. And maybe they kind of feed off of what you just said. Maybe they change the subject. Like maybe they start talking about something else. And you kind of see their faces go from, I'm interested, to, that's great, and I'm not interested anymore. Yes, the quiet progress definitely starts to build behind the scenes, and that's what you can't really get across to people who can't see your vision. So sometimes, you know, they kind of are like, well, hey, I heard that there's a new job opportunity, or have you applied to some jobs, or whatever the case is, because they can't grasp your vision. And that's okay. You know, not everybody is going to understand your vision. They're not going to understand what you're building and what you're doing, and they're not going to see it. All they're going to see is someone who doesn't have a regular job in society, and it's scary. That's a scary thought to some people. Some people can't get that. They can't grasp it until you start having revenue come in, or you start, gaining more clients, and you start taking your business seriously, because you should. I mean, you definitely should take your business serious. You definitely should take the building part serious as well. Anyways, before this gets any longer, because I'm trying to keep it at a certain length here. So, some closing thoughts here. If you've been in a season where things feel slow, or like I said, maybe you're quietly building, where you're wondering if anything is actually moving forward, this is your reminder that progress doesn't always look dramatic. It definitely isn't like those highlight reels that we see on Instagram or TikTok or, online. Sometimes progress looks like learning, or maybe it looks like experimenting, and maybe it looks like quietly building something behind the scenes. And that's okay. A lot of amazing things, I believe, if it's anything important to you, you definitely should build it in silence. That's an upcoming episode that I definitely want to talk on, what that means. A lot of people hear that and they're like, oh my God, you should not be silent about that. And they'll even bring in God and say, God has a plan and all this stuff. And see, that's why I want to talk about it, because this is an episode that could go, it definitely needs to be talked about, because if you're building in silence, it doesn't mean you're purposefully being secretive. I think that's what people get misconstrued, So, anyways, we're going to keep moving forward in this one. But that's an upcoming episode that I'm planning on talking about. But every small step forward is still movement. And movement is often what eventually creates the moments that people later call overnight success, which is also another mindset myth. But I've already talked about that in the past season. In season 1, you can tune into that one. I believe I called it something like the overnight success confusion, or something along those lines. So maybe some real takeaway, or some things to kind of take away from today's episode. Don't just wait for the good things. Create the momentum that allows them to happen. Alignment without action stays a dream. But alignment with movement, that's how ideas slowly turn into reality. And yes, I believe that's really all I wanted to talk about. I think that kind of wraps everything up here. I just want to thank you all for tuning in, and I really hope that you're able to take something from today's episode. Maybe, again, I feel like I say this in every episode, maybe some different ways of thinking about things, a different point of view, and all of that. So, yes, if this episode resonated with you, please feel free to share it with someone who might need to hear these things too. And of course, make sure to rate, subscribe, and all the things so that way you don't miss an episode. And I will see you all in the next episode. Bye!